Well, the first thing I think you need to understand is that the elusive goal here is what you see is what you get.
Right.
So we have two components here. We have the display, in which we're doing our editing, and we have the final print. And ultimately, what we want at this point is to have the two match.
Mm-hmm.
So my recommendation in terms of numbers is the numbers themselves are rather meaningless. They're just numeric values. The numbers that produce this visual match are the right numbers.
Mm-hmm.
It may be 80 candelas per meter squared D65. It may be 120 candelas. There's no way for anybody to define that number
Mm-hmm.
until you define how you're going to view the print next to the display.
Mm-hmm.
So we ultimately want is the print to come out. We want to compare it to the monitor, which means the monitor is part of the equation, and we want to look at them and see that they match.
Right.
That's the first thing. From there, we're going to take the print and move it into another location. Again, it might go into the kitchen. It might go in a gallery. It's now not associated with that monitor.
Right.
So it doesn't matter whether it matches the monitor at this point. It just has to look good
Right.
under that illuminant. And our eyes are very good at adapting to different illuminants. So a print that looks good next to the display with a good light source, whether it's a GTI booth or Solex bulbs, if you take that into another environment, as long as it's not some crazy light source like metal halide lighting on one end and a window on the other with daylight, generally speaking, your eye is going to adapt.
Okay.
Now, I know what John does, and I do myself, is that we can build illuminant-specific profiles.
Yeah.
So for the person who, let's say they're going to go and do a gallery show, they can go to the gallery and they can measure the illuminant with something like an I1 spectrophotometer and build that into the print profile.
Mm-hmm.
And with better monitor systems, what we can do is we can build different targets for the calibration, such that if we're going to be using a particular paper under a different illuminant, we can control that when we calibrate our monitor. But ultimately, what we want initially is a match between what we see on our display and what we get on our print next to the display. If we can achieve that, we're 95% there.
Right. And before I go back to the output part for different environments, I like to have one more question for you, Andrew, and that is basically, once I achieve what you just mentioned, the holy grail of what you see is what you get from monitor to print, or at least being close to it, what can I do from here? Is there a way where I can change my profiles or my lighting environment in the studio with the monitor to adjust to a different location so I can see already before I print what I would get for my kitchen, my gallery, my tungsten, my... is this a practical way to go, or is it better to say I'm going to calibrate my studio for one situation, for something neutral or something that is most likely my viewing environment, and then I go and I and then I adjust either through the print profiles or just hope that I'm in the ballpark and viewers' eyes adjust to whatever the environment is.
Well, think of it this way. If you were going to do a show, a gallery show,
right,
5 miles away, unless you were to actually go to that gallery and replicate the lighting that they're using for your prints,
it's going to be tough
bring it into your studio,
right,
there's no way that you're going to be able to look at that print
right
next to the monitor.
Right.
Okay? So, and as I said, ideally you're going to get a very close match. It's never going to be 100%. Because we've got an emissive display and a reflective print, and there's different contrast ratios. And what we want to do is get a semblance of understanding that what we see on our monitor is going to translate to our print. And I come from the old analog days of shooting photography where we'd set up our lighting and look at Polaroids. And we knew after many, many years of shooting Polaroids how that look would translate into our transparency. The Polaroid didn't look like the transparency. But we were able to predict what our transparency would look like.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, it's very, very similar in terms of seeing something on your monitor and then looking at emissive print.
Mm-hmm.
But short of bringing the illuminant in from another location and looking at that print next to your monitor, what I would suggest is that you get a good illuminant, something like a Solex bulb or perhaps a fluorescent bulb. There are some issues with fluorescence. Something that you can control, something that you can place a print in, look at it, match your display to that, and then when you take that print to another location, I think you'll find that your eye will adapt to most well-behaved illuminance, and you'll be quite pleased. That isn't to say that you shouldn't at some point decide if you want to go to that extra 2% into the process, measure the illuminant at the gallery and build that into your print profile. That's definitely a useful thing, but it's a tiny, tiny little tweak. The big issue is getting that print in the display next to each other to match. That's the 90% of the work that you have to sort of accomplish.